Nosedive. I remember the day that out of the blue, 6 new episodes of Black Mirror were suddenly available on Netflix. It's odd to think that up to that point there were only a total of 7 episodes, and yet with a bit of extra funding they were able to produce the same levels of work in significantly less time. The first of the 6 new episodes released in October last year is probably my favourite of the bunch, with its critique of behavioural monitoring and its display of incredible acting and cinematography. I have been excited to make this analysis since the episode came out. The individuals of this world are seemingly trapped by this all-encompassing form of social media that is basically Facebook meets TripAdvisor. For this reason, I shall be referring to the social network laid within the episode as TripBook, for the sake of convenience. Charlie Brooker himself said in an interview that the intention of the show is not to warn, but to worry its audiences, and this episode, for me at least, worries me the most. The reason I say this is because I can already see it happening before my eyes. I ordered a taxi the other day, only to get a text from the company asking me to rate my experience out of 5 stars. This is because I have an app on my phone that allows me to make bookings without needing to call them and gives me the option to pay with card instead of feeling extremely guilty for handing over a £20 note and the guy gives me that begrudging look wishing I'd brought a few coppers with me. Of course, I wasn't forced to give a rating of the experience, but it was just a goddamn taxi journey. It's not like it mattered that much to me that I simply had to give my opinion of it. There is also the aspect of everyday social media use that is extremely convenient, but you say one thing that's controversial or out of line with public opinion and boom! You can lose your job or have your house raided. Anyway, that's my opening anecdote wrapped up. Let's jump into the analysis. TripBook seems to provide a game, a social game, where those that play compete for social recognition. The end goal would be to achieve such a high rating that most will know you for how much of a good person you are. However, the idea of being a good person is not exactly set in stone because everybody's perspectives, expectations, and experiences are uniquely different. It's like rating your mates from best to worst, which isn't exactly a polite thing to do, as most would treat their friends equally and with respect and dignity, states that cannot be simplified to a rating of 4 decimal places. There doesn't seem to be any mention of an individual achieving an average of a 5-star rating. Perhaps those are reserved for those in power or celebrities, which would be really interesting. Even this decision would be disputable though. I'm sure the 2 latest American presidential nominees would have ratings that are absurdly low by this point in time, and even some of the most famous celebrities have been known to be involved in some horrific scandals. The reason why you can't put a price on a human life is the exact reason why this system would not be able to function without full cooperation from the public. This rating system could potentially overthrow any form of value system we have in exchange for narcissism and obsession, as shown through Lacey. The earliest this can be seen is in the episode's opening. Notice how the sunlight is seemingly honed in on her as she takes a picture of herself in this shot here. She is the star of her own reality TV show and she bloody loves it. She is also aware that everybody else is trying to get the best ratings as possible too, which is why we see her also obsessively rating the people she knows with 5 stars, just in case they might feel incentivized to give her a lower rating than a 5 too. Because life in this world is a lot easier if you have a high rating, you yourself must contribute to the attention economy whenever you have a moment to spare too. So entertainment is interwoven into rating people as if it's a necessity over kindness. Not only are they moderating other people's behaviour and rewarding conformity, they enforce it upon themselves too, which can be seen when Lacey rehearses her laughter. It's not just the laughter though, she takes the time to laugh at different levels, experimenting if you like, for she knows an absurd laugh could result in embarrassment and a decreased rating, as shown in the wedding scene later. One thing I found interesting in the episode is the set design of Lacey's home. Take away the more colourful aspects of the interior and you get a very dull looking apartment. The pink gown and cushions left on the couch are obviously of Lacey's influence as her peach pink matching dress and handbag are suited to her, whereas the blue t-shirt and surfboard are associated with her brother. This indicates that the pair are conforming to these archetypes of gendered colour so others can understand their character. Gone are the days of finding out an individual's interests and values. The public can just judge them based on how high their rating is. Lacey keeps the apartment obsessively clean, not because the house is going to be inspected, but is more likely a need to impress anybody coming over, for her rating is at stake should the house be left in a state because of her brother's sloppy attitude. Her compulsive desire to impress can be seen when she prepares her coffee and biscuit for a rating baiting picture. By showing us her disgust at the biscuit and the coffee, we can see that the money she spent on the coffee was not an investment so she could be energized by the caffeine in the drink, or even to relinquish thirst, but as an aesthetic to gain digital attention. This dig at the Instagram-founded food lewd pictures, which I too am guilty of, outlines the narcissistic tendencies of those that behave in this way. The image doesn't have any real meaning or artistic quality to it, but the attention gained from it is enough to give the creator a dopamine hit every time the like button is pressed. As the story progresses, it also becomes evident that these individuals are becoming so absorbed in their digital lives that they cannot talk to each other about anything other than their tripbook posts. Take the scene in the elevator, for example, where the two see each other's online posts through another alteration of the grains. Only this time, we can only see the social media accounts in front of them and are probably reliant on their phones to create these images before their very eyes. Lacey is incapable of discussing anything other than the latest events on their tripbook profiles. In fact, later on, she slips up and says this.
How's it going at Blankman?
Just great.
Well, I bet you work good there.
Thank you.
Demonstrating her incapability to even articulate sentences properly because of this. She even replicates Bethany's hand position on the handbag, and they both end up finishing each other's sentences, representing the false identity Lacey must put on just to impress others. The words that are coming out of her mouth contrast with the dissatisfied look on her face that is briefly shown before she either begins acting again or the scene cuts. This envious behaviour would probably not have been tolerated by Bethany had she seen her face. Interestingly, on the tripbook profiles of Bethany and Naomi, they have the Prime User button attached to them, almost like the verification badge on social media sites for users to prove that they are who they claim to be. Presumably, like the verification tick, it is not something you pay to get, but is earned through your status as an individual. However, neither Naomi or Bethany are real celebrities, as shown by the small amount of ratings these individuals get on their updates and pictures compared to that of real celebrities. Perhaps this is a commentary on how individuals online now can receive the same amount of attention, if not more, as renowned celebrities we see on TV. There is very little evidence needed for the fame that they have, only that lots of people give them attention online. This lack of evidence for judgment is also seen after Lacey has that awkward encounter with Chester and his healthy smoothies. The employee across from Lacey says that we are all on Gordon's side, as if the details of the breakup aren't important in making a judgment. This is the way it is, and if you disagree, will downvote you. This all ties into the post-truth of social media that many people are discussing currently. Whatever message is garnering the most attention or produces most emotion must be the truth, which I find rather concerning if we are to claim the truth or make judgments based on people's emotions instead of facts. Lacey's emotions are manipulated by the estate agent when we see the apartment. The overall layout is undoubtedly more spacious, but architecturally it seems pretty much the same. It's bland and dully coloured, only the grey is white, and this is clearly more aesthetically appealing than the other place. It's interesting that it's being sold as a social space, as the agent produces a hologram of Lacey in her ideal living state. Even the sickening billboard outside is catered to Lacey until she leaves and becomes empty again. This is enough to distract her from the fact that this is an absurdly large space for a single occupant, which ultimately sways her into deciding she wants the place. It's not about whether it's suitable for her as an individual, but more the individual she could be. One of the other rules of the game is that the points you give have more of an effect if you yourself have a higher rating. We see that for Lacey to achieve the 4.5 she needs to afford this expensive apartment, she needs to interact with and receive ratings from people with higher ratings. For inspiration in trying to become the ideal 4.5 individual, she spends her time looking over Naomi's tripbook page instead of being entertained or socializing in some way. This fascination closely resembles the appeal in watching a show like Keeping Up with the Kardashians. Neither the Kardashians or Naomi have done anything particularly noteworthy that makes them deserving of celebrity status, and yet there are individuals that are entertained by somebody who has more social status than them. As a YouTuber, I find this segment at the Reputelligent Company absolutely fascinating. It sets itself up like going to see a psychiatrist, with a complete record of the judgments people make of you every single moment of the day. The statistics that YouTube provides for my channel are very interesting though, because they can help you become not only more popular, but it can show you what's going right and wrong with particular videos and the attention rates of your viewers. This is the main reason why I no longer have an intro to my videos, because audience retention levels can disintegrate should you waste their time. They might skip over it so you lose out on watch time, or they could just leave the video entirely. Whether this should apply to human interactions, however, has a lot of ethical problems. These advisors, shall we say, can see who you've been interacting with and at what time. Would you want somebody to see who you have and haven't been talking to? Take Lacey's brother for example. He isn't exactly high caliber conversation material. In fact, he's a bit of a slob. Imagine being advised that you shouldn't hang out with an individual you like purely on the basis they have a low rating. It's disgraceful. Again, this goes back to not giving human beings price tags, but this whole setup is nauseating for creating genuine social interactions. Is it any surprise that people can't talk about anything other than their own little social media bubbles? It's interesting to see the level of dependency on their rating that the individuals in this story have. Chester cannot enter his own workplace for having such a low rating, so this rating does correlate with class. If you aren't good enough of a person, you can't have a place of work. The higher your rating, therefore, the more you get paid. This seems a little odd though when you consider that earlier Lacey was offered a discount on the apartment if she increases her rating. Then again, an apartment like this isn't exactly aiming to be purchased by lower class individuals, so I guess it's just the company being nicer to the nicest of people? But they're not even nice! They're fake and vile! Naomi is positively revolting as an individual, yet all that matters in this world appears to be keeping up the appearances. Lacey's first step to reaching her goal is by uploading the photograph of Mr. Rags, a childhood friend that has sentimental value to both herself and Naomi, or so we think. Despite sentimentality and nostalgia being the only aspects to the photograph that have any real meaning, this is enough for Naomi to seize the opportunity and make Lacey the maid of honour, despite it being merely an attempt to get a higher rating on both their parts. Even Lacey's brother, who ironically is the most honest and realistic individual despite spending most of his time outside of reality, can smell the dishonesty at play in their conversation. Lacey is initially skeptical about the offer, only for the camera to slowly zoom in on Naomi's face, indicating the emotional manipulation that's at play here. Only because of Lacey's blinding obsession with getting a higher rating is she able to accept the offer. It's the fact they couldn't be straight with each other and saying, "Look, you need high ratings, I can give them to you, let's help each other out here," that fuels Lacey's brother's loathing for this conversation. The shallowness of this whole affair is seen as Naomi sends over the guest list for the wedding. Her concern over who's invited has little to do with family or all the great people she's met over the years, and more to do with ratings. Lacey and her brother then have a row about the irrelevance of ratings, concluding it with,
"Good luck with your performance!"
Which is the most interesting thing about this. Everything, her personality, her clothes, her aspirations are all acted out to impress. As a result of her refusing to acknowledge this, the downward spiral of bad luck begins. The action of transporting herself from her house to the private island results in countless circumstances that couldn't have been avoided. It is her actions because of these circumstances that result in her getting a low rating, such as being horrifically annoying in the taxi and making a ruckus in the airport. Had she had control over her emotions, perhaps these bad things wouldn't have happened. Yet at the same time, the social media dominated society encourages over-emotional individuals, as long as they're expressed politely and abide by the rules of behaviour. The rules of behaviour are shown in this hilarious scene in the airport. The fact you can take double damage for swearing alone shows the intense risk that comes with behaving out of line. The staff members have become so pathetic that they can't even handle this woman being a little agitated at the fact that her flight had been cancelled, and when the security comes along, they're smiling as well. It's even funnier that despite most workplaces encourage the prohibition of phone use, this two-faced check-in lady just zaps her down another rating, and of course she doesn't get downvoted for not doing her job at any point. The disregard for those with low ratings begins to be explored as Lacey continues her journey. She has a phone call with Naomi in the car, who up until this point used the camera as well, but now that her rating is lower than a 4, she's just not interested. It is only when she meets a member of the public with a 1.4 rating does she begin to understand what her brother was talking about. Initially, she reacts with hesitance at Susan's offer, almost like a child meeting a stranger and reacting with the stranger danger mentality they're all taught in schools. Lacey's almost instinctive need to check if she's dangerous is mocked by Susan, because really, why would a dangerous individual or potential criminal post their activities online? Unless you're a member of ISIS. In fact, when Lacey begins running on about how her reputation will be affected by it all, Susan looks at her like she's the psychopath, which, as her brother initially pointed out, is kinda true. What makes this entire segment so interesting, though, is how unsociable the individual becomes from being so narcissistic. Your reputation is different for everybody. Some people will hate you, some people will love you. That's just life. It cannot be simply boiled down to a number. This is shown with how nice Susan is despite all that happened to her, and how free she has become because of her independence from the rating system that drove her husband into the grave. It has a deeper philosophical meaning when Lacey reveals she just wants to be content, which to me is an illusion because you'll always be dissatisfied with something in your life. Money can't buy you happiness, and neither can being the most liked person in the world. Perhaps there is no existential meaning to working hard to get where you want to be, but it's still worth doing. Otherwise, you will have nothing, and that can be the most difficult thing in the world to escape from once you're stuck there. With Lacey's revelation and her persistence to finish her journey, the score begins to repeat the downvote sound effect in time with the music, reflecting the gradual downvoting she receives as her journey has gone on. However, the piece is very hopeful, showing her strength as an individual increasing the less she cares about her reputation. The strength gives her the willpower to finish what she started, just to ruin this woman who brought her on this ridiculous journey in the first place. She looks like a monster when she arrives at the wedding and is such a threat to the peace that even the groom doesn't have the confidence to get rid of her at first. The smearing of her makeup gives her what looks to me like black tears, and tears are quite significant in this story because they are symbolic of the highest and lowest states of emotion. Lacey cries in the episode when she rehearses the speech and when Naomi invites her to the wedding, but here it looks like tears of anger and resentment. It's very striking imagery. Naomi sees Lacey as a serious threat to her reputation because she now, like Susan, has nothing left to lose. After her performance at the wedding, she is imprisoned. Whether this place is permanent is a matter of debate, because if it is, she didn't even have a trial. It's interesting that the prison she is thrown into is almost liberating for her. She's no longer under any obligation to behave the way the public wants her to. She can say whatever she wants and can no longer see that irritating little number that pops up whenever she sees anybody. Having the eye filter taken out is enough for her to see the real material world, not the fake one she left behind, as she stares at the dust in the cell as a thing of beauty. This is fascinating because the whole point of prison was to take away your freedom, and yet somehow this rating system that people live under is more restrictive than prison. Is this the future we are headed towards? Only time will tell. Thanks for watching. For me, this is the most unsettling episode of them all. What episode of Black Mirror gives you the chills? Comment below where we will continue this discussion.
Fuck the planet!